These are the biodiversity notes. These notes are going to be due August 29th, so make sure you have out a piece of paper and a pencil, because as soon as you finish these, you should turn them in. Biodiversity is looking at how much variety of life there is. And when we look at variety of life, we look at three different areas. We look at the DNA, the variety of species, and then the variety within the ecosystem. So we title that genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Please make sure that you write these three down, because these levels of biodiversity help us decide how it was caused and how we should save it. So it's really what we're going to look at: what biodiversity is on the slide in front of you, how it's lost, and how do we save it? Because most of the time it's lost, it's pretty much our fault anyway. So when looking at biodiversity distribution, remember when we looked at the different biomes last section, we also saw the different concentrations of animals. In the rainforest, we had a huge concentration, but in the tundra and the desert, we had a low concentration. So total, there's millions and millions of species, and these species are not evenly distributed globally. So we have to look within the biomes to find out the biodiversity of the species. So rainforest has a high biodiversity, tundra has a low biodiversity. Most of these species are actually bugs and things that we can't see, usually. Other benefits to having biodiversity is agriculture. It gives us more variety with our food, helps us to select traits, or gives us traits that are more resistant by selective evolution. Also gives us medicines, medicinal purposes. This is where we get our penicillin from. It comes from bacteria that we found in the rainforest. We also have the ecotourism. Basically, how many areas make their money is off of the biodiversity. People go there for the life. When looking at losing biodiversity, there's different ways and different types. So looking at the mass loss of biodiversity is with extinctions and extirpation. Extinctions are a loss of diversity and the loss of the species, globally. So across the whole world, gone, dinosaurs. Extirpation is a loss of the species in a given area. So it's no longer on the Australian continent, but it is on the North American continent. And that very easily happens. When looking at the biodiversity risk, we label these risks. So the two that we focus the most on are endangered and threatened. When looking at endangered species, those are species that are below the minimal viable population, meaning no matter how much they reproduce, they are not going to ever be safe. They will go extinct eventually, because they'll try and reproduce, and it'll end up being such a closed population that they'll end up mating within the family, and then at that point, the genetics will break down. A threatened species is one that we notice is becoming smaller, either from the population dying or from habitat loss. And without help, this threatened species will become extinct. So when it's on the threatened list, we go, okay, we need to stop. We need to make sure that this can come back from it. Usually, species that are on the endangered list don't come back. The threatened list is actually called a red list. So we do have a red list out there that can tell us all of it. I believe there's about 1,300 species. Oh, hey, it says that on the slide. There are about 1,300 species on these two lists. All right, causes of biodiversity loss. Please make sure that you write these down, but also skip every 2 lines, because you're going to add descriptions to each of these. So do causes of biodiversity loss, indent, habitat change and loss, skip 2 lines, invasive species, skip 2 lines, pollution, skip 2 lines, overharvesting, skip 2 lines. All right, when looking at habitat change and loss, we're looking at habitat fragmentation. Let me highlight that. We have habitat fragmentation. This can happen naturally, or it can happen man-made. Man-made, it's when we build roads and cities. It can cut off the habitat with a migratory path, like dams. Naturally, this can happen from fires and floods. Like if a river changes, then it can cut through part of their territory. Invasive species, this is looking at species that do not normally belong in that area and will now harm. So looking at invasive species of like Asian carp in Asia, they're natural. They have natural predators. They belong in Asia. We brought them over here. That's the thing. Most invasive species we brought over, humans. we brought them over, and in the Great Lakes, they're a huge, huge problem. So we actually have spent millions of dollars within the Great Lakes in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, and part of Canada alone to stop multiple different types of invasive species. And we'll go over a huge list of them when we go outside or went outside. When we go outside, because we're going to go outside on the 2nd and the 3rd, the Tuesday and the Wednesday. Don't forget that permission slip, by the way, because if you forget, you're not going to be able to go. We're going to look at the invasive species that are out in our own backyard. When you are looking at overharvesting, I think that's on the next slide. Nope. Where is it? Okay, yeah, but extinction by hunting or overharvesting by humans. Basically, we have laws that stop people from overhunting and overharvesting. You have to get a permit when you hunt. You're only allowed to hunt so many and this, that, and the other thing. When you break those, it's called poaching. And poaching is what can cause the biodiversity loss because we have rules when it comes to overharvesting now. All right, when looking at, did I talk about hotspots yet? No, I didn't. I'm going crazy. Sorry, I'm like flopping all the way around. Where is it? Okay, well, I'm going to keep going. The EPA, excuse my ADD moment there. Environmental Protection Agency was founded in the 1970s. This was created to protect human health and the environment through the laws passed by Congress. The EPA is one law that one agency, it's an agency of the government that we're going to constantly go back to. That agency will make laws and acts that other people will have to follow. It has to deal with the environment. We're going to talk about that in great detail all year. So this is a really, really important one. The Endangered Species Act was in 1973, so 3 years after the EPA was founded. This is a law that protects biodiversity. It is the most controversial law because of how it stops a lot of progress. I'm using finger quotes here, progress. One example I can think of is a dam was going to be built in Colorado, but they stopped it because the only migratory path for this fish was up the river, and if they built the dam, then it would cut off the migratory path and make the fish go extinct. So no dam was built because of the Endangered Species Act. So still to this day, people are fighting with it and fighting against it because it goes against humans and it very much sides with animals. So it's one of those that it's good to have around to help our earth, but it makes a lot of people angry. All right, there are different approaches to save the biodiversity. So captive breeding programs, raising and breeding organisms that are released back into the wild. This is done in zoos and different animal sanctuaries, so not necessarily just zoos, but like this wildlife reserve. They will raise and breed them and treat it more like the wild so that when they release them into the wild, they'll still be safe. There's a lot of like National Geographic stories on this. It's really cool to see because they'll try and treat them as much as possible like the wild, but they're protected from predators so that when they go into the wild, they will still be able to survive. And species survival plan is something that every zoo has to have. It's a program to save individual species, especially if they're on the endangered or threatened list. So it also helps them breed. It keeps genetics logs to help save that species. With the CDC Survival Plan, it was developed in 1981. It's made for species that are threatened or endangered. This is the plan the zoos and aquariums to implement. Make sure you write this down. SSP is how it's usually associated with. This is one that you will see again. So make sure you write these two down. Hey, here's the hotspots. Okay, so there's hotspots and dead zones. When you're looking at biodiversity hotspots, these are when you have at least 1,500 different plant species. You can also have dead zones where you don't have very many plant species. Dead zones are usually occurred by pollution. Like there's a little area that's polluted so bad that nothing can survive there anymore. The area of Fukushima is one intense area because there was the nuclear explosion and nothing can survive there anymore. There's still, of course, people living there because we're dumb, but there's no animals that are living there anymore, so it's considered a dead zone, to where the other part of Japan is considered a hot spot because of how many different species are found there. Okay, hey, that's the end of it. Woohoo! Make sure that you turn in notes by August 29th. That is a Friday. The 6.2 study guide and or, because you can do both, book notes are due as well. see if I can autocorrect these while I'm doing this. Okay, and then permission slip is due September 2nd. If you don't have it, you don't go outside. Instead, you write an essay on biodiversity. Okay, let me make this bigger so more people can see it. I swear I know how to use this program. Oh, that is opposite. Oh, awesome. Go ahead, you can laugh at me. It's alright, totally acceptable. I'm like sitting here fumbling. Hey, there we go. Alright, wow, well, okay. I'm still going to do that. And or book notes. See, this is what happens when I type too fast. Permission slip. Okay, well, that's it. If you have questions, let me know. Have a good evening, and make sure you turn this in with your name on it and your hour, because I don't have your hours memorized yet, sorry.